Hello everybody, AJ here for the Mighty Glue Stick. How's it going? And today, Dragonborn, a player character race for the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. This is a hot request among the Mighty Glue Stick viewers, so I'm going to go into some detail on the Dragonborn, where they stem from, where they first appear in the game's history, how they developed into a fully fledged character class, how they were a pivotal story element of the setting for 4th edition, how they are different in the main settings for the game, how they slot into the Forgotten Realms, and I'm mostly concentrating on the Forgotten Realms, as I tend to on all of my videos. I'm not very familiar with Eberron and other game settings, so I don't tend to delve very deeply into those to shorten my amount of time researching things. What are they like in person? How do they think? What is their society like? What are their goals, their beliefs? What does Draconic actually sound like? What are some of the common phrases you can say to let people at your gaming table know that you are not just playing a large brute with teeth and scales, you're actually playing a creature that is neither a reptile or a mammal. It's a draconic being, unlike the creatures on the earth. The core concept of Dragonborn started out quite different in 3.5 edition D&D. The name Dragonborn comes from this, so let me explain and take you on an amazing journey through time. We begin the story at the end of the Dawn Age. This is not the Dawn War, the Dawn Age. 30,000 years ago, the world has been dominated by the creator races for the last 5,000 years during the Age of Thunder, and in the Dawn Age, the dragons, who have spread across the world, finally take flight together to wipe the current dominant and corrupted empire, that of the avian creator race and creator of the wyverns, the Aeri, from the face of the planet. The destruction of the dragonflight was awesome. They purged the world of Aeri and ushered in a time of dragons and giants. For the next 6,000 years, the world was dominated by the mighty realms of the giants and the civilization of the dragons. And by that I mean the dragons were largely responsible for teaching the lesser mortal races to be civilized, while the metallics favoured elves, gnomes, humans and dwarves. The chromatics preferred more war-loving races and taught them how to build them fortresses around their hoards of treasure. The dragons and giants fought a genocidal series of wars against each other, and the lesser races grew into their own power in the shadows of this great conflict. The dwarves turned against the tyrannical rule of the giant overlords, while at the same time the elves created great magic rituals known as the Mythalars, and from this they created the Dragon Rage to free themselves of the dominance of the dragons, which caused the dragons' aggression to take over so that they would turn even on their own children in savage violence. Around this time, the dragons had their own civil war, where the religious division between followers of Tiamat and followers of Bahamut boiled over into open warfare. At this time, both Tiamat and Bahamut influenced the world directly, with Tiamat creating the Dragonspawn and Bahamut creating the Dragonborn. It is interesting to note that Tiamat's Dragonspawn have resulted in the existence of kobolds, the winged Erd kobolds, and many species of drakes, as well as a lot of legendary monsters, most of whom thankfully died violent deaths long ago or were stolen away to the Nine Hells to serve as training tools. In Draconic, the name of those mortal humanoids who devoted themselves to the service of the dragon god Bahamut was Ux Bahamути. They could be any race as long as they met Bahamut's standards of nobility and virtue and were willing to devote their life to the service and ideals of Bahamut in the Forgotten Realms. In 3.5 edition, the Dragonborn created this way are sterile, because Bahamut would only accept those who willingly chose to serve rather than those born into service with no choice. In 4th edition, this was adapted, and we see that Dragonborn have risen to become a great empire of their own, called Arcosia in the world of Narath, the official setting of that edition, but that their empire had fallen in all or nothing fights with the tieflings of Baal Terath. On another world, Kryn, the evil chromatic dragon, stole eggs of the metallic dragons and corrupted them using magical ritual, transforming them into the Draconians. But, like the Dragonborn created by Bahamut, these were not natural creatures. Many of them were spawned from each egg. So each egg produced many Draconians. They were all sterile, and when they died, the elemental energy inside them caused them to turn to stone or explode. It raged out of control. Dragonborn in 5th edition are a true race. They carry with them a lot of the ancient history of the world and preserve their ancient traditions. They are draconic beings. They have an integral connection to elemental power and magic that is part of their personal identity and their culture. So, basic god lore and some conflicting origin stories told by the Dragonborn themselves. There is a sect of Dragonborn who believe that the Dragonborn were created not by Bahamut or Tiamat, but by Io, the dragon god that was killed by the primordial known as Eric Hus, the king of terror, who split Io clean in half, nose to tail, with a mighty blow from a rough-hewn axe of pure adamantium. These Dragonborn therefore believe that dragons were created after they were, by the two halves of Io that became Bahamut and Tiamat. Bahamut created the metallic dragons and Tiamat created the chromatic dragons, but the Dragonborn were created with the blood of Io and not fated from birth to be good or evil. More on that later. However, this is a rare and particularly egotistical belief that is not the norm, nor is it true that Dragonborn predate dragons. In 5th edition, the main world setting is Abiatorul, the Forgotten Realms, and yes, the Dragonborn have always been part of a complex epic history of the world. Playing a Dragonborn provides an opportunity to explore an intelligent being that differs greatly from a human being in many ways. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's fun. First, they're not built the same. They stand taller than the average human, 6'2" to 6'8", and are powerfully built and relatively heavy, averaging 250 pounds, or about 113 kilograms, and often 300 pounds or more, and almost no difference in the size between males and females. But they don't have the same bone structure as your eye. They have very strong bones, and they have less dense core than ours. Not hollow, but less dense. Plus, the bones tend to be larger. This allows the muscles more anchoring, which larger area to anchor to, increasing their strength. And the muscles, the organs, the entire biology of a Dragonborn is infused with elemental power. They augment their strength with the sheer energy that comes through their very being. You and I have no idea what it must feel like to be able to generate, store, and unleash a destructive bolt of lightning that blasts anything within 30 feet of your face, or exhale a roar of jet-like flame, or spit a gout of sizzling acid. This all requires a huge amount of metabolic energy, and if it was simple biology, Dragonborn would have to spend half their day doing nothing but eating. No, these are beings who are fonts of elemental energy. They feel it ebb and flow within themselves and with their emotions. It is as much a natural part of them as their language that they have known since they hatched and grew into adulthood. Just a side note on the gender differences between Dragonborn. You may see female Dragonborn depicted with the sort of curves you would see on one of the mammal races. While they are not mammals, they do nurse their infants for a few months before the baby's teeth grow in, and these are fangs, so they've transitioned to soft food as soon as they start teething, pretty much. Females do have additional body fat that they need for producing eggs, because that takes a large investment of the body's resources, producing all of the nutrients an infant needs in one package. Yeah, you bet they've got some curves, and they probably have a lot of fluctuation in their body fat over a course of a reproductive cycle, which I can assure you they will not be interested in discussing with a mammal. They find the pregnancy of other humanoid races kind of gross. From the perspective of a Dragonborn, the very idea of carrying a baby inside yourself, which is involved in giving birth to it, well, they don't think it's any sort of improvement over hatching from eggs. Like dragons, Dragonborn do not need to keep their eggs constantly warm as long as they are not freezing or cooking. The eggs are just fine, maintained by elemental energy inside them. At times, the eggs may actually give off a little more heat than their surroundings. Dragonborn tend to be more hotter than other people, almost feverish to the touch. While the Dragonborn hatches from an egg in just a few weeks, the eggs develop inside the mother for a few months before she lays it, normally one at a time. Very rarely she'll lay two, and they're very soft when laid and harden quickly to a tough leather layer around soft tissue and the liquid nutrients. Certainly tougher than a bird egg and a bit more robust than a reptile egg, but not overly large, about 7 inches long, more elongated than a bird egg, more like a large leathery pill. A Dragonborn egg can easily be carried in one hand. So, when they hatch, Dragonborn babies are not very big. Certainly not as large as a human baby and tiny compared to a Goliath baby, but they grow fast, and within a year they're the size of a 3-year-old human child. Within a year. They are predatory beings. While they eat a variety of food sources, they prefer meat to be their primary source of protein, and they can subsist on a vegetarian diet, but it's really not ideal, and they suffer more significant problems with it than other races. If you ever see a Dragonborn monk roll an avocado across a table and then roar and stab it with a knife, you're probably best to eat at another table. And by all that's holy, do not pan-fry bacon anywhere near them if you value your life. They have 3 fingers and a thumb that end in long talons that grow from the tip of the finger. They don't have soft pads on their fingers. They don't have as fine a sense of touch, but they are by no means clumsy. They can use those talons as delicately as tweezers. One need only watch a Dragonborn pick his teeth with them after a meal. The teeth are fangs, and there are a lot of them. A knocked out tooth will seem to be replaced, but it's just the rest of the fangs shifting forwards in the jaw to fill the gap. Dragonborn who have lost a lot of teeth may be quite sensitive on the subject, just fair warning. They have scales all over their body. Some are thick and about as sensitive as a thick callus. Tearing one of these scales off is not a big deal, and they mainly concentrate on the forearms, the shins, the thighs, the shoulders, and of course on the head. And they have lots of big scales on the back of their head, which look a bit like corded, braided hair. Some are thin and almost as sensitive as human skin on the rest of the body, quite fine, like snake scale. Getting injured in a sensitive area is just as painful for them as it is for us, but in general, Dragonborn are much tougher than humans. They can withstand walking through a hedge of thorns far better than a human can, and are not bothered by biting insects or burning heat of the noonday sun, within reason. They dislike walking around in pouring rain as much as anyone, and while they have much tougher lungs than most other races, they dislike breathing clouds of dust or heavy smoke. Even if it doesn't significantly impair them. So, compared to other humanoids, Dragonborn have very short childhoods, and they are nowhere near as helpless and reliant on their parents, able to get up and walk mere hours after they hatch. They only take 3 years to be as large and capable as a 10-year-old human, and by age of 15, they're fully grown adults. So, although they live around the same time, the same amount of years as a human, they begin with quite a head start, and they also have a lot of they've got a lot more expectations and responsibilities placed on them by their parent at a very young age, like very young. The Dragonborn parents, or those acting as a child's parent or guardian, trained them about their nature, about their elemental powers, their breath weapon, and the rich legacy of their language and culture. Some Dragonborn never develop a breath weapon. It's not a huge social stigma. Dragonborn have some degree of inherent memory. They know the basics of the Draconic language when they hatch, and have a strong inclination towards the typical alignment and kind of dragon they resemble. But they are not restricted to being good or lawful metallics or evil chaotic chromatics. It's just easier for them to fall into that sort of behaviour without any other influence in their life. Dragonborn tend to be decisive. They may make a wrong decision, but for them, even that is better than not making any decision at all. And so it is with their beliefs. Long ago, the dragons lost faith with their gods. Since the endless conflicts were devastating their population, they turned away from devoted prayer and attention to their gods, and this resulted in the Draconic pantheon losing power and dominance, and some of the ancient dragon gods fell so far that they ceased to be active in the Forgotten Realms at all. However, Bahamut and Tiamat remain strong and present in all Draconic beings' day-to-day lives, and Dragonborn often see the world in a stark contrasts of good and evil, right and wrong, law and chaos. Dragonborn don't tend to dither or hesitate. They also don't have a lot of tolerance for those who do. So this might be seen as impatience, arrogance, or a lack of consideration, but really it's just a drive to get things done, get things moving, and deal with whatever happens as it happens. As with any intelligent race, there are exceptions to every broad description, and there are certainly some very slow, thoughtful, and very patient, wise Dragonborn who can be infuriatingly slow to act. But again, when they do make up their mind, they are not likely to change it in a hurry either. It should also be noted that Dragonborn have typically towering egos, and they have a weakness for being flattered, complimented, praised, and being the centre of attention. A Dragonborn will actually puff up somewhat when they are sincerely complimented and praised. This can be fun to roleplay at the game table, and nothing says Dragonborn like inhaling deeply, sitting up in the chair, nose pointed in the air, and loudly agreeing with any compliment said to you. I agree. There are no warriors of my equal in the land. It is as you have always said. Are you listening to this man? He speaks the truth. Do many Dragonborn see themselves as better than other races? Yes, they sure do. But this doesn't have to be portrayed in a negative way. They are not nasty about it. They just tend to point out uncomfortable facts with less tact than is ideal. Those who get familiar with Dragonborn learn two things. One is that this is offset greatly by how damn reliable and useful Dragonborn are, and also they're very loyal to their friends, or at least whoever is paying them the most gold. Second, it is that if you can't stand this habit of theirs, it's best to either keep your irritation to yourself or find somewhere else to be. because you do not want to challenge a Dragonborn on the subject of its superiority. They are draconic after all, and they do not tolerate being challenged by anyone they are sure they can kick the crap out of. There are exceptions. They will tolerate insults from truly stupid or intoxicated people, to a point. Also, they will acknowledge the superiority of those they really do consider to be better than them, much to the shock or awe of those who they've been lording it over for months and months. When a Goliath in a tavern beats them in an arm wrestle, they will compliment the Goliath's power and proclaim it publicly, with good nature. If someone manages to impress a Dragonborn, that Dragonborn won't forget it. Ever. This can be a great hook for an adventure. When a Dragonborn shows up out of the blue and singles out one of the player characters, regaling them with the time that the character demonstrated their superior skills, and by the way, the Dragonborn knows something that the character would have no problem with skills like that. Are you kidding? Oh yeah, and well, yes, why? The Dragonborn just happens to be heading that way. Why not come along and earn glory and wealth together? Dragonborn would not phrase it as, I need you, please come and help me. That's decidedly undraconic. So, other interesting touches I've added to Dragonborn in my campaign worlds, probably the most fun was the idea that Dragonborn love to sleep on gold. So the Dragonborn have a love of making blankets of gold rings, golden chainmail sleeping rolls. These are, of course, damned expensive, so they're also serving as a status symbol. Also, they're heavy. A decent gold blanket could weigh a fair bit, as the links would tend to stretch, so they'd have to double up the links and have multiple links, increasing the density and weight. Plus, the Dragonborn would wear out the rings as they sleep on it, so it would need constant upkeep. A dragon fussing over its gold hoard. Natural behaviour and certainly a lot of fun. Also, the big roll of gold is a huge attraction for thieves, so the Dragonborn is loath to leave it behind anywhere that it can get stolen, and Celestia help anyone who does. It would be getting home to discover that someone stole your bed and all your money. Not cool, man. So, let's talk specifically about more history of the Forgotten Realms Dragonborn, and I'm going to directly quote the Forgotten Realms wiki here, because I could not put this more succinctly and clearly for you. So I'm just gonna rip it straight off there. The origin of the Dragonborn race was uncertain and shrouded in myth. While the origin of Tel'Qussar and Corellin's children was well known and dwarves firmly believed in their stony origin, Dragonborn were unsure whence they came. Some legends of Abir told that Io, the first and greatest of the dragon gods, created the Dragonborn as servants for the first dragons. These stories related that the Dragonborn, like dragons, were formed from the essence of both the astral sea and the elemental chaos, though their nature overall favoured the elemental over the astral, just like dragons. A slight variation of this was common among the Dragonborn of Timanther, who believed that they were bred by the dragon lords of Abir for a cruel fate as slaves. There may be some truth to that. The Platinum Cadre posited an alternative theory in their efforts to spread the worship of Bahamut, that the Dragonborn were the ancient creations of the Platinum Dragon. However, most of the order was ridiculed or even openly persecuted for their beliefs, since to the Dragonborn of Timanther, the idea of a good dragon, let alone a dragon god, was completely alien. Dragons were brutally harsh to them. Yet another less popular tale told that Io was killed in a war between the gods and the primordials, and the Dragonborn sprang from his spilled blood. However, Dragonborn were in fact related to the Dragonborn of Bahamut, but only a handful of old dragons actually knew that. So the Dragonborn Genesis of 3.5 edition is really the true origin story of the Dragonborn. They originally started out as these sterile creations of Bahamut, but at some point on Abir, the dragons actually figured out how to create them themselves. Regardless of the origin of the race, Dragonborn had been the slaves of dragons for millennia. Occasionally clans would rise in rebellion, but only a few, such as the nation of Tirmansheba, were ever successful. However, during the Spell Plague, beginning in 1385 DR, Tirmansheba was believed destroyed, wiped out following the transplantation of its centre from Abir to Toril. Despite this tragedy, the Iberian expatriates of the new nation of Timanther remained strong, and by 1479 DR formed a strong and steady homeland for the Dragonborn of Toril that began to see acceptance among its neighbours. Many Dragonborn migrated from Timanther to the lands of Toril, though most that were not a part of the nation remain enslaved by dragons, either on Abir or within the new continent of returned Abir. This, of course, takes over the continent of Maztica, unfortunately. which probably explains why there's so many tabaxi wandering around everywhere, since their homeland has been transformed into a land full of dragons. Other than well-known hatred of dragons, Dragonborn had few definitive relationships with other races. The Dragonborn of Tamantha are known to tolerate races of all kinds, extending their courtesy even to races who they generally disliked, such as tieflings. This tolerance did not, however, equate to equality before the law, and only Dragonborn were allowed to participate in Tamantha's authoritarian government. The strongest friendships the Dragonborn forged were with the humans of Chesenta and High Imaska, even though both nations were traditional enemies. The Tamantharans were, however, distrusting of two of their other neighbours, the Genasi of Akanul, with whom they had a long-standing grudge, and the Dragon Lords of Murgon, whom they believed as no more deserving of friendship than the tyrants whom they had fought to free themselves from on Iberia. So, there you go. Dragonborn, fantastic, very popular player character race. They can be noble, indomitable, action heroes. They can also be arrogant, violent, greedy villains. Even the best of them can sometimes be a bit of a bully, and wherever they go, they will draw a lot of attention. People tend to react to them however they believe Dragonborn to be. So they judge them by their scales, which can be frustrating for any Dragonborn. Perhaps they gravitate towards military lifestyles because that's where they find the most acceptance. The same is also true of Dragonborn sorcerers. This is something they fall into almost naturally, as they can tap into the magic inherent within them. Some also master other draconic powers and actually manage to grow fully functional wings. However, they are never anywhere near as good at taking to the air as true dragons, since they don't have a tail. Nor does the wing membranes support the hips and legs very well, so the dragon tends to hang in the air as they use the wings to assist great leaps into the air and glide for sort of movement, but gaining any sort of altitude is quite laborious and very hard to maintain. I'm greatly enjoying the character of Dinar Blitzen, played by Ryan Hartman, as part of Acquisitions Incorporated C team. If you're unfamiliar with Penny Arcade's Dungeons & Dragons activities, I suggest you remedy that affliction immediately. Dinar is a narcissistic copper dragonborn paladin, and watching Ryan go into great detail on just how Dinar vomits up a spray of acid is truly hilarious. For further reading and stuff I consulted, check out the Player's Handbook for 5th edition, the Player's Handbook for 4th edition, if you dare, Races and Classes, 4th edition preview, Draconomicon for Pentalic Dragons, Player's Handbook for Races, Dragonborn for 4th edition, Races of the Dragon, Dragon Magazine number 365 for Ecology of the Dragonborn, and online check out the Forgotten Realms wiki on Dragonborn, and of course Wikipedia's entry for Dungeons & Dragons on Dragonborn. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll catch you again soon.